Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel and to the 65th episode of The Rolling Stone. Hope that you're all staying as cool and comfortable as you can during this heat wave that we're going through. But heat is appropriate because we do have a hot edition of The Rolling Stone lined up for this week. So we are just going to dive into that without any further ado. And our first story for this week, it's a response video. Actually, not to a story per se, but to something that I saw on Instagram. This came from Allie Beth Stuckey, whom I'm sure you know is a host over at Glenn Beck's Blaze TV. She's the host of her podcast, Relatable. And on her Instagram account this past week, Allie Beth Stuckey made an Instagram video where she said that in her estimation, a lot of people whom she described as center-left are quote-unquote waking up to the reality that we are now living in with, as she puts it, tyranny being on our doorstep. This is actually what she said.
There are a lot of people not on the right who I feel are waking up to the reality of tyranny that is on our doorstep, that is coming predominantly from the left, the crackdown on free speech, the resentment towards religious liberty, the absolute disdain for anyone who is outside of the far left orthodoxy. There are a lot of people, I would say center left, that are saying, wow, I don't really want to live in an unfree country. Like, I kind of want to be able to think and do and say the things I want to think and do and say. And to that, I say, welcome to the party, pal. I'm glad to have you. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I really am. Here's to hoping and praying that more and more people wake up. Tyranny is bad.
Now, I am going to say up front and everything that Allie Beth Stuckey is a much bigger commentator, personality, name brand, etc., 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 than I am. Okay, so even though I do not see really any evidence of people, quote-unquote, waking up, I will be the first one to admit that Stuckey's tendrils are much longer and thicker and go much deeper into current events than mine do. So it's very possible that she is seeing things that I am completely oblivious about, okay? I know that she says that she feels that people are waking up. We're going to get into that in a minute. But again, she might be onto something that I am completely unaware of. However, having said that, I feel like I've got to point out a couple of things. I don't want to be Johnny Raincloud at all, which I seem to cast myself into that role a lot. But if I do so, gang, it's because I respect you. And I want to give you an honest opinion, my honest opinion about what's going on. I'm not in the business of just sending out happy, clappy talk. That's not how I roll. So I do have a couple of problems with Stuckey's analysis that she gave here on Instagram. And the first one comes from the analogy that she gives, the phrase, Americans are waking up. This is something that is very popular on both sides of the political chasm. In fact, just a few weeks ago, also on Instagram, another of the Blaze TV's commentators, Graham Allen, said the exact same thing in a post. He said, if anyone so much as touches the national anthem, this was when news stories were going out and circulating that it's high time that we got rid of the national anthem because it's racist like everything else is, and maybe we should replace it with John Lennon's Imagine. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could make the national anthem a song that says that nations are inherently evil because we're supposed to imagine a world with no borders, aka no countries? Wouldn't that just be grand? And Graham Allen's point was, his message was, if people so much as touch the national anthem, then there is going to be a massive uprising on the right because, quote unquote, Americans are waking up, in all caps. So that is something that the right has been saying for a long time. Interestingly enough, that is also what the left says. Our current word, our colloquial phrase or word, woke, that the left is so fond of using, that means that you are, quote unquote, awake. Okay, if you're woke, you're awake to the larger reality that's around you. The systematic racism, the institutional bigotry and prejudice, the sordid history of colonialism, imperialism, and religion exported by Western civilization around the world, etc., etc. If you're on the left and you're woke, that is supposed to mean that you are aware of all these things. So the phrase itself, Americans are waking up, that in and of itself is a cliche, okay? But that's not the deepest problem with this. The deepest problem, or one of the deepest problems, is what it suggests, okay? When you say Americans are waking up, you're basically saying that Americans are finally becoming aware of what's going on around us, as she says there in her Instagram story. But the problem is, if you just wake up, then you're still basically useless. Because let me give you an example, okay? We wake up every single morning. I woke up this morning. You woke up this morning. But if that was the only thing that we did this morning, the day would have been practically wasted. Because you can be awake but still spend the entire day in bed, not doing anything. And when that happens, you can literally say that you've wasted the day. You've dillied the day away in bed, okay? There are only a very few exceptions to that rule where if you stay in bed all day, you haven't wasted the day. There are only two examples that I can think of. One, you are sick with something like a fever or a flu, or you're recovering from surgery or something like that, or you're on your honeymoon, okay? Those are the only two exceptions. Those are the two exceptions that I can think of that prove the rule that waking up but spending the entire day in bed is a waste of time and a waste of a day. Okay, so if you don't do anything, if you wake up, if you're aware but you don't do anything, then you're still being useless. You can't just wake up. You have to actually act. You have to put your feet on the floor of your bedroom, get yourself up, put yourself together, and go out into the wide world and do whatever. That's the only way that you can actually make a difference. So maybe I should give Allie Beth the benefit of the doubt and assume that that's what she means. When she says, oh, Americans are waking up, that means that people are becoming aware and they're going to get active. But then we come to another problem, as I see it, which is so many people on the right think that what we need is more political action. That is so often what the right reduces everything down to. It's a political problem. So we have to win this election over here. We have to elect these people to these offices. We have to keep a Republican majority in the Senate. We have to regain a Republican majority in the House. We have to nominate so-called conservatives to the courts, etc., blah, 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 and that's going to solve all of our problems. The problem, however, with that analysis is that it completely ignores the situation that we're in. So if you become awake, but you say all we need to do is just vote more and put more of the right people into these offices, then what you're really saying is that you might be awake but you're sleepwalking. That's really what it comes down to, because the problems that we have today, they are not political. When you get right down to it, they are not political. I know I'm guilty of this too when I've said that everything has been politicized, but really if we wanted to be more accurate, we would say that everything has been ideological sized. everything has become ideological. That's the better way to say that. Because the problems that we have today, they are cultural, and if I can get away with saying this word, they are theological. I mean, for example, look at what happened to Garrett Wolf's stepmom. He was the former police officer in Atlanta who shot Rayshard Brooks at that Wendy's. When his stepmom posted on her own social media about the horrendous way that Rolf was being treated by the Atlanta DA, Paul Howard, her company fired her because her co-workers said that they no longer felt comfortable working around her after they discovered what she had posted on social media, defending her stepson. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the Rolling Stone. Look at what's happened to the NFL. The Washington Redskins have now changed their name. The NFL actually announced that they were going to be playing the quote-unquote Black National Anthem before the American National Anthem for the first week of the season. Or look at what's happened to NASCAR, okay, raising a huge kerfuffle because someone looped a manual garage door pull in a garage that was assigned to Bubba Wallace. And everyone said, oh my God, someone made a noose in Bubba Wallace's garage. We talked about that here on the Rolling Stone. Or look at what's happened to the NBA, where the head of that guy, Adam Silver, I think his name is, has basically said that the NBA will no longer be making custom-made shirts, etc., for fans. Because a lot of fans were asking for jerseys, they were asking for specific merchandise that had Free Hong Kong on the shirts and on the merchandise. And so Silver basically said, yeah, we're getting rid of all that. We don't want to offend our Chinese overlords. Look at another example. Look at Netflix. Okay? Peddling things like the remake of She-Ra, Princess of Power, that old corny 80s animated show, which in and of itself was a spin-off of He-Man, which in and of itself was a spin-off, a kiddie-friendly spin-off of Conan, where now in Netflix's She-Ra, you have non-binary characters, you've got lesbian characters, etc., etc. We talked a few weeks ago, too, about Disney, Pixar making a short which featured the first openly gay protagonist in anything Disney related. So, political solutions do not solve these sorts of problems. And if we're not actually willing to solve these problems that we have, these cultural problems, these theological problems, if we are simply intent on focusing on the political side of everything, then we are going to lose. Which means that it doesn't matter how awake we are, we're still going to fail at the end of the day. Also, I have to raise this one other point, okay? Because Allie Beth makes the point in her video where she says that a lot of people on the left are waking up because they're realizing, as she puts it, that tyranny is bad, and that if the trajectory that we are on continues, then they won't be able to say what they want, they won't be able to act like they want, they won't be able to think what they like, because the mob is going to come for them, like it's going to come eventually for all of us. This is another problem that modern-day conservatism has, which is the reduction of freedom to doing simply what I want to do. This is simply what I want to do. Okay, that is the essence of freedom. And this actually has been around for a very, very long time, because the conservative movement, it made a choice in the 50s and in the 60s when the new conservative movement actually came into its own, with people like William F. Buckley, my personal hero, Russell Kirk, Frank Meyer for libertarianism. Conservatism, as a whole, okay, made a choice. They said that they were going to emphasize freedom as, I would call it, atomistic, individualistic autonomy. To contrast it and America with the big enemy at that time, the USSR. Because the conservative movement was saying, look at what the USSR does. It micromanages every single aspect of people's lives. That's not freedom. That is not America. Freedom is being able to do whatever you want as long as you aren't harming anyone else. So you can go out of your home at 10 o'clock at night and smoke a cigarette. Or you can, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start and have a drink before you have to go to work. Right? You can do all these things because you're an American and you are free. And we don't live under a tyrannical system like people in the Soviet Union do. That was the gamble that conservatism made, to emphasize freedom from exterior control, to contrast itself and America with the USSR, which really heavily emphasized, not really heavily emphasized, but which reduced freedom to freedom for a purpose. Because the Soviet Union, if you really want to dig deep into it, paradoxically, was not against freedom, but it had a very Rousseauian idea of freedom. The idea was people could only become free by basically sacrificing their individualism, their personality, their personalism, and surrendering it to the collective. Because only the vanguard, only the people who had become enlightened, only the people who had become woke knew what real freedom was. That was the entire point of the new Soviet man. So that's the gamble that conservatism made. But it then backfired because that line of thought led to where we are now. In 1992, in fact, we got, because of this line of thought, Anthony Kennedy's famous or infamous mystery passage where he said that at the heart of liberty is the right for every single individual to decide for himself what the meaning of life is, what the meaning of the universe is. So basically, we're all our own little petty demigod, which can decide what reality means for all of us. I think we've talked about the mystery passage before here on the channel. That's where that line of thought took us. So, if that is the essence of freedom, just being able to do what you want, being able to say what you want, do what you want, think however you want, no matter what those things are. Because remember, again, Allie Beth is someone who doesn't really have a problem with people burning the American flag. She'll say that she's personally against it. She'll say that it's horrible, but gosh darn it, you know what? That's just what freedom is. Being able to do horrible, disgusting things like burning an American flag. And that just shows how deeply we're committed to freedom and freedom of speech, etc., etc., etc. If that is the definition of freedom that we are taking, again as our standard, if that is what we are fighting for, then everything will be for naught. Because everything that we try to do to reclaim the country, the culture, our national soul, our cultural civilizational soul, if I can actually put it like that, is going to fail. Because you need more than just personal autonomy to win a movement. You have to have a dream. You have to have a vision. It has to be grandiose. It really has to be a shining city on a hill, to quote John Winthrop. That's what it has to be. And that is what the conservative movement doesn't have. And also, I don't really think I need to bring this up because it should be obvious to everyone, because you guys are a sharp gang, I know that. You can't win a movement either by saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It kind of struck a sour note in my mind, or the little red flags went up in my mind when she told all of the people center left who are starting to quote unquote wake up, when she told them, well, welcome to the party, pal. Oh, we're happy to have you. It's like, these people are still on the left. Okay? So they probably believe in things that contradict what conservatives at least are supposed to believe. And once again, to go back to the example of the Cold War and the new conservative movement and Frank Meyer's fusionism and everything, when you have a common enemy, that can work. You can say sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but when that enemy is gone, that coalition deteriorates. Sometimes the enemy doesn't even have to be gone. Okay? The White Russians during the Russian Civil War after the Bolshevik Revolution, which was made up of czarists, monarchists, Democrats, anarchists, capitalists, fascists, other degrees of socialism. They were all united in their hatred for the Soviet Union, for the Reds, for the Bolsheviks. But the thing was, that did not stop them from hating each other. And so they basically destroyed themselves. The Soviets were able to divide them, and then they picked them off. They picked off each group one by one. That is also not a great plan to actually win a culture war. So, those are just some of my thoughts on her perspective. I disagree with it, of course, surprise, surprise, I disagreed with something in the mainstream. What a shock. That is story number 1.